High in the air, on the plane, the place was relatively quiet. The movement was normal, as it should be during any routine flight, nothing strange. The sound of whispered conversation was interrupted by the snoring of one of the passengers, who covered his face with a book he was just reading before falling asleep. There is a faint echo of music emanating from small speakers attached to the chairs, which some people enjoy with their eyes closed, and there is laughter that rises from time to time to disturb the mood of two lovers who are shyly holding each other's hands as they wander into their own world, and the sound of the flight attendant's footsteps as they echo between the seats, coming and going. As for him, he sat quietly, his eyes watching those coming and going, and his ears listening with great interest to every movement and stillness around him. He was waiting for the little boy who was running in the corridor to pass by, so that he could turn to the hostess who was sitting next to him, trembling, and then whisper in her ear, saying in a threatening tone, "And if the ransom delivery is delayed, this plane will turn into fireworks in the sky of Seattle." It is one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, and its fame has increased because it has remained unsolved to this day. So allow me to stimulate your intelligence. Perhaps together we will arrive at an opinion or a logical explanation for what happened and how it happened on that cold evening of November 24th, 1971, when I reached the authorities. Serious threats related to the safety of a flight departing from Portland Airport, where a passenger claimed that he was carrying a bomb, and if he did not receive a large financial ransom, he would blow up the plane. At first glance, this may seem like an ordinary plot for a plane hijacking, but it is not so. No, it is not at all an ordinary story. Rather, it is an American legend that has proven to everyone that what happens in movies is not necessarily just imagination. Dan Cooper, this was the name of the man on the passenger list who, on Thanksgiving Day, booked a seat on a plane departing from Portland International Airport and heading to Seattle on a 30-minute flight. He was wearing a light raincoat, a suit, and a black tie. He looked like a businessman in his dress and appearance. Some witnesses described him as being in his mid-40s. As the giant plane took off, its seats were occupied by only 36 passengers. Dan Cooper was quietly sitting in the back cabin after ordering some drinks. Everything was going on normally until Cooper unleashed a huge surprise minutes after takeoff by revealing his hellish plans to the flight attendant standing by. Next to him was Florence Schaffner, who took a piece of paper from him, but she did not care about it, thinking that it was just a foolish thing like what many male travelers with her usually do. But he quickly surprised her when he said to her, "Ma'am, it would be better for you to look at this piece of paper in my possession, bomb." Florence raised her head and looked into his eyes and knew immediately that the matter was serious. Then she looked at the paper to find it carefully written in large letters, and found the following: "I have a bomb in my bag. I want you to sit next to me." She did what he ordered her to do. She sat next to him and then calmly asked him to see the bomb. He opened his bag to see inside it there were tangled red wires in addition to a cylindrical battery. He told her that he wanted $200,000 and some other items, and asked to stop in Seattle, which is the city the plane was heading to from the beginning, and do not neglect it, or I will do this myself. The flight attendant was breathing with difficulty. She imagined the plane exploding and her parents knowing she had been killed while they were in front of the television watching the news. She took a deep breath and moved nervously toward the cockpit to tell the plane's pilot, who in turn called the air traffic control tower at Tacoma, Seattle Airport, which notified the federal authorities so that the security personnel would be aware. They are facing a great imminent danger that may quickly turn into a resounding disaster, a hijacked plane full of passengers that may explode at any moment. What a predicament. It was agreed to make the passengers believe that their arrival in Seattle would be delayed slightly due to minor technical difficulties, in order to avoid a certain state of panic on board the plane if the news spread. An urgent order came from the president of the plane, Queen Northwest Orient. stressing the crew's full cooperation with the hijacker. The plane, while everyone moved to collect the required ransom until the plane reached Seattle. How could it not be, when the company's reputation depended on the push of the detonation button? But what if you knew that Dan Cooper was more respected than dozens of other passengers? According to Florence, the host who confronted Cooper more than anyone else, he was not like the evil pirate that the hosts always feared would come, nor a nervous criminal as she thought at first. Rather, he was trying to calm her down, and according to her, he was a well-mannered man, fluent and respectful, to the point that he insisted he had to pay for the drinks he bought and even paid more money than required. In general, Cooper was social, as if on a routine professional mission, during which he behaved normally, even admirably. He was not nervous, but rather kind. He did not show any signs of brutality or crime. He was calm all the time. This is what another flight attendant said. And what you missed is the strangest thing: he provided meals to the plane crew at his expense. The plane remained circling a wide strait between two islands for no less than 2 hours, until Seattle police and FBI agents finally authorized it to head towards Tacoma Airport after the required ransom amount was collected and emergency personnel were prepared for the anticipated confrontation. "It seems that we have arrived at Tacoma Airport," the hijacker said coldly to the flight attendant, referring to Seattle Airport, after being informed that his requests had been met minutes before the plane landed. What is the next part of his plan? Upon arrival at Tacoma Airport, Cooper directed the landing site himself and ordered the plane's captain to turn off the lights in the cockpit in case police snipers shot him, while the airline's operations manager himself headed towards the plane in civilian clothing to deliver the ransom. When his orders reached his hands, Cooper allowed the flight attendants to leave the plane and release all passengers. As soon as the plane was empty of passengers, Cooper found himself alone with the specialized crew and began discussing with them matters related to aviation, such as the weather condition, the capacity of the fuel tank, and the lowest possible altitude, so that it became clear to everyone that he was planning to take off again. The co-pilot reported that Cooper discussed with the plane crew a lot. Before he agreed with them on a specific destination, which was Mexico City, he also specified a specific stopping point for refueling and recommended that the pilot take off safely, with the lowest possible altitude and the slowest speed. In addition to the money, of course, Cooper requested 4 parachutes. But what does he intend to do with 4 umbrellas? What is he planning? What if he intended to jump from an almost impossible height? It seems that we are facing a difficult adventure. After 2 hours of stopping at Seattle Airport, the plane took off again with only Cooper, Commander William Scott, his co-pilot Radizak, flight attendant Tina Mucklow, and a specialized flight engineer on board. There were 2 warplanes following the hijacked plane, in addition to control towers. During the flight, Cooper ordered the flight attendant to go to the pilot's cabin and stay there after closing the door. She did what he asked and joined the plane crew. Only Cooper himself remained in the passenger portion of the plane. After a few minutes, an alert came to the cockpit stating that the back door of the plane had moved, and that the internal pressure of the plane had destabilized and there was an abnormal movement at the back of the plane. And because the plane crew knew that Cooper had parachutes, they therefore assumed that he opened the plane door and jumped up in the air. Indeed, when they went to check, they found the plane door open and Cooper had disappeared. The security authorities quickly received this news from the plane crew. A massive search operation was launched with lightning speed. Naval ships, air vehicles, helicopters, foot police, and everyone had the same goal, which was to trace the fleeing criminal, who undoubtedly landed in one of the forests surrounding the place over which the plane was flying the hour he jumped from it. While the intensive search was underway, the Boeing plane had landed at the private Reno airport in Nevada City, and police officers stormed it and made sure that the hijacker had actually disappeared from the plane. Of course, one of the most important steps that must be taken is to examine the fingerprints and verify any evidence that might lead them to the identity of the kidnapper, but the police officers found 66 unidentified fingerprints in addition to Cooper's tie and 2 umbrellas, one of which was torn, and the bottom line is that they did not find anything. As for the search operations, there were some differences in estimating the area in which Cooper may have landed. But most policemen and experts agreed that the place where Cooper landed by parachute was likely to be the forests of southern Washington. To confirm this, they conducted an experiment in which they dropped a 91 kilograms object from the back door of the same plane under the same conditions, until it eventually fell into the Lewis River in the southwest of Washington. Note that jumping from a large, fast passenger plane is a very dangerous matter, especially with the darkness, bad weather, and cloudy skies, which contributed to the military pilots who were following the plane not noticing Cooper's jump from the back door, which represents a small object that is difficult to distinguish. Under such circumstances, the police had doubts that Cooper had been able to open the parachute in the first place. Days after the kidnapper's disappearance, and with the police desperate to identify or find the kidnapper, the serial numbers of the securities that Cooper had taken as ransom were distributed to all banks, financial institutions, casinos, and places where large sums of money were dealt with. That is, if any identical number was noticed, the authorities will be informed immediately. But a year passed and no one called. The police published the serial numbers and announced them to the general public, with a reward of up to 15% of the ransom amount. Of course, this reward quickly attracted the attention of the fraudsters, and some forgery attempts occurred, represented by some claiming that they possessed securities from the ransom money. In the year 1972, 2 men forged $20 securities and printed the serial numbers of the ransom money on them for the purpose of deceiving a Newsweek magazine reporter. To get $30,000 from him, they also asked for similar money. Efforts to search for Cooper continued, and many people who claimed to have seen Cooper were interrogated, but in reality the police could not confirm these allegations, as they did not have any picture of the kidnapper. All they had was a series of descriptions based on which an approximate sketch of the kidnapper's appearance was made, which confused the police's attempts to determine the kidnapper's true identity, so that they suspected many people bearing the name of the wanted kidnapper and interrogated them carefully. But all search, investigation, and interrogation efforts failed and ended in a dead end. The kidnapper evaporated into the air. And in the end, nothing remained of him except the name D.B. Cooper, which is the name by which he booked the flight ticket, and became known by it, and was circulated by international newspapers and stations, turning into a symbol of the case that was subjected to many developments and interpretations that are confusing in the fullest sense of the word. The journalist conducted an interview with a man. They claimed he was the hijacker of the plane. "We are trying to solve one of the greatest mysterious cases in history, and we need your help." This is what Agent Jeffrey Gray said to the people. Investigators are certain that the possibility of Cooper surviving his jump is weak, due to the difficult weather conditions at that time. They also ruled out his success in opening the parachute, in addition to the seriousness of the fall. Jumping and heading into the wilderness without a clear plan, at an altitude of 10,000 feet, without sufficient equipment, in terrible conditions, he may not have been able to open the parachute in the first place. This is what the specialized FBI agent Larry Carr said, indicating the extent of the complexity. The topic. We initially thought Cooper was an experienced jumper, perhaps a paratrooper. But after years of research, we concluded that this is not true, as no expert could have jumped in the middle of the night in rainy weather, exposing himself to a terrible wind speed of 200 miles per hour. Simply put, it was a dangerous risk. The bottom line is that the investigators found that it was very difficult for Cooper to survive without prior planning in anticipation of the landing place or a helpful partner who would receive him and facilitate him, which opens the door to a strong hypothesis that the hijacker who baffled the world was dead and gone. But just a moment. Suppose we believed what the police said, and gave ourselves peace of mind and forgot the mystery of the case after we were reassured by the hypothesis that Cooper died during the dangerous jump. But where's the body? Is it reasonable that after careful inspection of the forests and mountains, no trace of the body was found? Not even remnants, like the clothes or the parachute with which he landed, or the bundles of money that he had. Isn't this strange? Someone might say that not finding the body does not greatly affect the hypothesis of Cooper's death, as he may have died and his body was hidden by unknown persons or even swept away by water or floods and swallowed by the ground, and this is very possible. I think that most of you were reassured by the hypothesis of Cooper's death, but not all of you will remain reassured after knowing what happened in the following years, especially 9 years after the incident. In the year 1978, 13 miles from Castle Rock, Washington, there was a hunter chasing a deer. During the chase, the deer stopped for a moment, so the hunter shot it, but the deer was not hit and moved away quickly. The hunter lowered his rifle and bent down, placing his hands on his knees, panting and muttering curses. While he was kneeling on his knees with his head bowed due to extreme fatigue, he noticed a strange thing covered in dirt. He put what was in his hands aside, brushed the dirt off that thing, and raised it to find it was a medium-sized board with writing on it. By cleaning the board well, the hunter was able to read what was on it and found that it was instructions related to flying. The hunter was not a stranger to the area, so the events of the D.B. Cooper case immediately came to his mind, so he took the sign to the police, who in turn discovered something that made all the authorities prepare again to penetrate deep into the forests. The sign contained instructions on how to open the back door of an airplane, and the news shook the course of the case. Calm and made those concerned reconsider their calculations, because the sign found belonged to the hijacked Boeing 727, from which Cooper jumped from the back door. Finding the sign changed some of the details of the case and scattered the security men. In February of 1980, a small family was quietly spending their vacation in a camp near the Columbia River, not far from the city of Vancouver, Washington, when they were startled by the screams of their son coming from afar with a wad of money in his hand. While 8-year-old Brian Ingram was playing near the river, he found 2 wads of money valued at $5,800 buried under the dirt. The bills were loose and some were cut up, but they were in rubber bands. The police were called, and after tests on the financial packages, FBI researchers came to the conclusion that these banknotes belonged to the ransom and were arranged exactly as they had been presented. This discovery led to many speculations. Investigators and experts speculated that the money drifted across the waters of the Columbia River in connected tributaries and ended up buried, and this was also suggested by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This discovery destroyed all the foundations of security research, as it has now become clear that Cooper fell in a different place than what was previously believed by the police, and that throughout these years they were searching in the wrong place. This new discovery led to 2 possibilities. The first is that Cooper was dead and the money was swept away in the dirt, and the second is that Cooper is alive and has left the place. The floating money hypothesis was not without holes. If Cooper had died and the money had been swept away, then why had Cooper's body not been swept away? His clothes? His stuff? Why only $5,800? The ransom amounted to $200,000 and it was in a bag. The matter is illogical. Quite simply, there may be manipulation in the matter. It could be on the part of Cooper, as it could be on the part of other people, and why not on the part of an animal that caused the banknotes to be swept away? Or the two packages may have fallen out of the kidnapper's back by chance during the jump, and in more than one possible way. As for Cooper's survival, the police's search in the wrong place may have given him greater freedom of movement, but will he bury a sum of money of that value, as an offering, for example? It may have fallen from him, and it is not unlikely that there were external parties who intervened in the matter, but all the circumstances focused on whether D.B. Cooper survived or not. In 1986, during a search along the riverbanks, a skeleton was discovered, but after examination, forensic doctors confirmed that it belonged to a woman. The series of controversial details did not end here, as in 1988 an air parachute was found near a river, but FBI experts confirmed that it was an anchor parachute, meaning that it was a parachute launched or deployed from a rapidly moving object in order to slow down and curb the speed of it body to provide greater control and stability. In 2008, children found another umbrella near Amboy, Washington. But it has been confirmed that it is a remnant of World War II. All these details may be exciting, but they do not represent any difference in the phases of the case and do not change anything at all, because in the end, the plane's instructions sign and the ransom money are the only material evidence of the kidnapping that was found outside the plane. The bottom line is that the police did not find any useful information about the man who called himself D.B. Cooper. What is his real name? No one knows. All the police had were drawings of Dan Cooper's face based on the initial testimonies provided by witnesses on the day of the kidnapping, and even after many years of research and Cooper's advanced age, the police presented a new hypothetical drawing of Cooper in the form of an old man. D.B. Cooper represented the beginning of the end for these unchecked incidents, which caused major problems in every way. As a puzzle and a clear challenge to a powerful state with sophisticated security apparatuses, his ransom was the price paid for a major change in American and global air security. The authorities imposed searches on passengers and their bags, broke many traditional surveillance rules, and provided Boeing aircraft with special protection devices and new technologies. In light of these updates, there was a significant decrease in aircraft hijackings. In 1973, there were 31 aircraft hijacking attempts, most of which were aimed at extortion to obtain money, compared to only 2 attempts in 1974, which were by 2 psychiatric patients. Perhaps this is the most pressing question in the case. Suspicions have revolved around the many suspected people who are competent in the field of aviation, especially jumping from airplanes. However, as soon as researchers focus on a specific person who deserves serious follow-up, another suspect steals the spotlight. A woman named Marla Cooper claimed that the kidnapper was her uncle, saying that he died in 1999. When you carefully examine the story of D.B. Cooper, you will find a very exciting story. Kidnapping and disappearance incidents are always difficult. Did you know that the case file was officially closed after 45 years of research? Yes, in 2016, and the truth is that it was closed only according to investigation papers. D.B. Cooper is a hero, but illegally? It doesn't matter.